Hey everybody, thanks for coming out to the World Campus Technology Club. Our guest tonight is John Stoner, and he will be talking about how to get started in cybersecurity. Thanks for coming, John.
Hey, thanks for having me again. I really enjoy presenting to you guys. So we're going to dive right in. I will probably have plenty of time for questions, and then all my contact information is at the end, although some of you know how to get a hold of me already. My disclaimer that this is all my personal opinion, so it could totally be wrong. It does not reflect on my employer. So some of you saw my earlier presentation, but just a little bit about me. I'm a cyber threat intel analyst. I have over 20 years professional experience, but it's kind of split. 10 of it was with the US Army as a signals intelligence or SIGINT analyst. And then in 2010, I got out of the Army and sort of transitioned into cybersecurity. And I've done a lot of things until I found where I belonged, which is probably a pretty common occurrence for people in this field. So I finally found my ideal niche in cyber threat intelligence, although I really did enjoy my time as an instructor as well. I really like teaching. I have a bunch of certifications, in part because I was teaching many of those certifications. I finally finished my associate's degree that took 5 years for me to do, so I was pretty slow on that. I also really like youth soccer. I play a lot of video games, which some of us were talking about. So my career path was after my mom made me go to college, which I sort of kind of did for half a semester, I secretly joined the Army. I don't necessarily recommend that as an option, but sometimes you just got to do what you think is best. So the first thing I want to cover is the fact that IT, or IIS in some cases, information systems, and cybersecurity are two related but fairly distinct fields with some overlap. During some people's careers, they will go back and forth between the fields. I say a lot of people, many people in cybersecurity worked in what would be a traditional IT role, and vice versa. Some people in cybersecurity will go back into an IT role. This is probably more common for some technical roles, but you could also see that happening for like leadership, CTO, CISO, deputy directors, stuff like that. Like they may go back and forth as well. But the one thing that I think is important is that for people who are just getting into the field or interested, whether you're a recent student or you were an insurance salesman and that's not working out, you want to change careers, is that there's really differences between the fields for the most part, especially when you're getting started. A lot of the basic foundational knowledge might be the same across certain jobs in both broad fields, but there will be some differences as well. So this is really about cybersecurity. It's not really about information technology jobs, but there's probably going to be some overlap. So this is another really important concept. So people who mentor and do career coaching villages and stuff like I do often get someone who comes up to us and that person says, I want to get involved in cybersecurity. That's a cool story, bro. I'm going to need you to be more specific. So what we mean by that is that this is a huge field. Like cybersecurity is a huge field. So imagine that you're in school or, you've decided your insurance job sucks. I'm going to get like banned on YouTube from Geico. And you're like, I want to do cybersecurity. That's like saying, I want to work in sales, or I want to work in business, or I want to work in the medical field. So we want to start focusing down a path, because just like in medicine, where you can't do everything, you really can't do everything in cybersecurity. So there's going to be some foundational things we talk about that you probably should learn, but I have a lot of hyperlinks in here, and the first hyperlink is to the NIST cybersecurity work roles. So the NIST describes 52 types of jobs in cybersecurity, and it's the NIST, so it's an excruciating level of detail, including all the knowledge, skills, and abilities, and sort of what this role does. And even with those 52 laid out at that level of detail, they really don't cover everything. They don't really necessarily have a cyber threat intelligence role. They don't really have like a pen tester or red teamer. A little bit of their roles are focused on like DoD and military, so they might not, like there's a few that might not be super applicable to the civilian world, although most of them will be. So for instance, a lot of, people who are going to college, maybe Penn State, just are getting your computer science degree, maybe you're involved in some things and you want to be a red teamer, or you want to do vulnerability analysis, or maybe you're not really sure. So this is a place to help you sort of start to narrow down your focus. So we're going to come back to this concept later as well, and this will be applicable whether you're like working on your resume, looking for jobs, because there's a big difference between a penetration tester junior role and a junior tier 1 security operations center SOC analyst, or a entry-level cyber defense analyst role. Right? There's a lot of differences between these jobs, even though they're entry level perhaps. So when you go to talk to like recruiters and at career fairs or ask your mentor questions, you're going to want to do yourself some help, sort of help yourself beforehand and do some research and narrow down your interests a little bit. But you can always change careers down the line too. Like you saw, I've done a lot of things in cyber in 10 years. So you can navigate your career. So most people who are getting into cybersecurity need to have some foundational, some fundamental skills. Now, even this will vary a little bit depending on what it is you want to do. So I get the question sometimes from people who are interested in cyber threat intelligence of, should I be a programmer? Should I know programming languages? If you can program, the answer is yes. I thank God for Google to pass my one programming class because I cannot program. I'm not a programmer, I'm not a scripter. So there are some instances where that probably holds me back with automating some tasks or writing some Python scripts to do some things, but it's not necessarily something that prevents me from doing my job. Whereas if you want to be like a penetration tester, then yeah, you're going to need to know programming, right? So again, to answer your question of should I study this, well, it depends what you want to do and what you want to do for the first part of your career in cybersecurity. So I highly recommend there are some, foundational things. So like the things that are contained in a CompTIA, Net Plus, A Plus, and Sec Plus class. We don't have to talk about the boot camps. We're getting the certification. But that core content of material, like here, here's my A plus book. So like this is one course, right? It's like 1,200 pages, foundational. So no, you might not be in computer repair, but you should have a pretty good understanding of computer hardware and what the CPU does and what the graphics card does and the different types of hard drives, right? So you may not use that on a day-to-day basis every second of your life if you're going to be a blue teamer or if you're doing vulnerability testing, but it's going to be stuff that you need to have an understanding of so that you can build knowledge on top of that. Same with all the networking fundamentals, understanding TCP IP, UDP, OSI, all the different basic protocols, how HTTPS works, how PKI works, right? What multi-factor authentication is, why is that important? What is a risk assessment? What is risk? All of these sort of core foundational concepts that then let you specialize. So I said I would use the medical analogy quite a bit. So you can kind of think about this in terms of maybe another field that you are more familiar with because most people have seen a doctor, gone to the hospital, urgent care, something like that, right? The primary physician that you see, your GP, right, has tons of foundational knowledge. And over the course of their experience, will maybe be exposed to certain things. So, maybe that person has seen a lot of people with shingles. So they know a lot more about shingles than maybe another GP, but they're certainly not a brain surgeon and they're certainly not a cancer specialist. And maybe they don't, have a very specific knowledge. And that, if you kind of use that analogy when you look at other people in cybersecurity, a lot of us might be able to do some basic network analysis or some very basic vulnerability or red teaming, but you can't expect your cloud architect to be a red teamer. And I wouldn't expect the red teamer to necessarily understand how to, administer all these Linux systems or configure ESXi, right? Because they're specialties. So if you're not sure what you want to do, that NIST description of jobs may help you, because there's some other considerations when you're looking to get into this field as well. Like, what kind of a job are you interested in, right? And this sort of dovetails into some career advice too. If let's pretend COVID isn't happening. If you love to travel and you really like exciting things like skydiving and race cars and all sorts of like activities like that, then some sort of first line incident responder where you get called and fly places and go all over the place might be your dream job, right? That might be the worst job for someone else. So that might not be what they want to do. Unfortunately, in computer forensics, they still routinely come across a lot of child pornography. So if that is terrifying and you don't think you have the sort of personality to deal with that trauma, then maybe forensics isn't a field for you, right? And only you can answer these sorts of questions. But all the different fields have pros and cons. Maybe you really like structure and rigor. So, programming or reverse engineering malware, right? If you're a freewheeling type of person, maybe a different type of job is going to work better for you. Those are all sorts of general things to keep in mind as well. But you have to get this foundation, right? So I recommend sort of all of the content that's in A+, Net+, Sec+, and I know some people hate Certified Ethical Hacker, but that teaches you a lot of really important security concepts in that class, right? You don't have to go to a boot camp, but if you get a book about, the basics of hacking, I think that's a really good starting point as you explore what maybe interests you in cybersecurity. The other key thing is you're going to want to build up some hands-on skills, and a lot of more traditional ways to study this field may not give you those skills. So SANS classes are really expensive, but they're really good. But there's a lot of proactive things you can do to build up skills, like having a home lab, and more things in this virtual environment are happening where there's labs that you can practice and play with tools and software and techniques at, because that's going to be really critical. We're going to get back to that again. So I can make this PowerPoint available too, because it's hyperlinked to all kinds of things. So again, to be successful in cybersecurity requires a lot of baseline knowledge, right? So with this baseline knowledge of IT fundamentals and security basics and, ports and protocols and threats, general, criminal threats, what is phishing, how does cross-site scripting work, what is a 0-day? And then from that foundation, we start to narrow our expertise and narrow our field of study. Like maybe you should learn Linux. I think everybody should play around with multiple operating systems. There's multiple flavors of Linux. So I talked to some people who didn't even really know there was anything besides Windows and Mac, right? So if this is a legit interest, you're going to want to like try a lot of different Linux flavors, install Kali somewhere on a USB bootable thumb drive, figure out how VMs work. So there's a lot of resources here. There's a lot of free resources. So don't feel like you have to pay to get this fundamental training. There's a ton of free resources, library books, used Amazon books, whatever learning works for you. I like to watch videos. Some people like a book. I like to take notes. So like if I do get a book, I'm going to buy it so I can highlight and take notes. So all of this stuff is free, and there's tons and tons and tons of more free information. There are no right and wrong ways to learn. So people want to know is, should I get my degree? Yes, a degree is helpful. Should I get certifications? Yes, certifications are helpful. Should I do labs? Should I do capture the flags? Should I try lockpick village? Like anything that you do to further your education, you're going to want to annotate it, put it on your resume, and work towards specific goals for your interests and where you think your career is going to go. And I want to, this goes back to learning style, learning preferences too. Some people really need an instructor to ask questions to. And some people will take a boot camp and never talk to the instructor at all. So why did you pay all that money to do the boot camp when you could have watched the videos online? Right? So think about how you learn. Now, as you continue the journey, it's going to have to be more than just knowledge, right? It's going to have to be hands-on skills. So that's where having some sort of home lab or a lab at school, or figuring out how the virtual online labs work, which are available. And this is going to require you may need to step out of your comfort zone, right? You might need to push beyond what is comfortable for you. So for instance, the first time I ever used Kali Linux, or the first time I'm trying to set up a VM, right? I don't know what I'm doing, right? So you keep trying and trying and trying and Googling things, maybe phone a friend if things aren't working. But in cybersecurity, the number one skill is just figuring it out. Like critical thinking and problem solving is probably the biggest single skill people who are successful in cybersecurity have. Like my mom wants to know how I know everything. I don't know everything. I just Google really well and see what works. And if that doesn't work, then we Google again. And I can also use other sites other than Google, like DuckDuckGo, right? There's more than one way to solve the problem. There are some MOOCs online. There's all sorts of classes online. There's a ton of virtual conferences going on right now. A lot of them have capture the flags. Everybody should try to capture the flag. I don't care if you want to do cyber policy, do a capture the flag. It's unbelievable, and you'll meet some really great people. This is probably my single biggest and most important slide in this whole deck. Is that there are people in this field who are going to be happy to administer some Windows domains and have sort of a career that's, I don't want to use the term mediocre, but like maybe they don't have a lot of options, right? They haven't done a lot to give themselves career options, right? There is nothing wrong with that if that person is happy. If that person's not happy, then they should take steps to do some training and try to get a better job. When people like myself are hiring for this field, mostly for junior roles, right? Because this is about breaking into cybersecurity. I want to see the passion. I want to see your intellectual curiosity, your initiative in the interview. I want to see that on the resume when I look at it. What are you doing to show that you have a real interest in being a professional in a fairly difficult field of work? This is a difficult field of work. This is not something where you can get your 4-year degree normally in cybersecurity, or associate's degree and a certification and get your job, and then that's it. This is a continual education, continual learning career until you call it quits. And what that will look like will change as your career goes and depending on what you want your career to be, but continual learning in cybersecurity is critical. So I highly recommend that in order for you to start developing these skills, you do the home lab, get some VMs, get some ISO files, and practice on things that you're not comfortable with. Experiment and see what you think is interesting. If you love log analysis and PCAP analysis, there are jobs where that's the primary skill. And in terms of cyber defense or SOC analysts, there's a lot of specialization where we might all be SOC analysts, and maybe the newest people are tier 1 and some other people are tier 2, but like we might always go to Adam when we have a PCAP question, or we might always go to Rachel when it's a ransomware situation, because these people have developed expertise. They've developed specializations, even though technically they have the same job title. This happens where I work all the time in cyber threat intelligence. There's somewhere between 100 and 160 advanced persistent threats. They're probably not all currently active. Let's say there's 60 active APTs today, right? Well, you can't follow and develop expertise on that many things, right? So you tend to specialize, or maybe somebody's really knowledgeable about, criminal, like the Fin series, like Fin 7 or something like that. Or maybe this person really knows about like muddy water, or this person really knows about APT 28. So even within your job, you're going to end up probably developing some specializations. So there's a lot of different options to do a home lab, but I really recommend as people trying to break into the field, you're developing these skills as much as you can on your own or with classes that are available or at conferences. So uh, this is just pretty much the chart of the critical skill is figuring it out, right? So did that work? Okay, no, that didn't work for whatever problem I'm trying to solve. Well, then I try the next thing, and then I try the next thing, and then I try the next thing. So I was mentoring someone who probably is not going to do great in cybersecurity because she just couldn't figure out how to set up a VM. So I sent that person directions, I sent that person a step-by-step video, but some people have this fear they're gonna break something. Like, I'm not going to do something right. Correct. You are going to break something. I have bricked someone's computer. I have totally screwed stuff up. I've reinstalled Windows 7 more times than I ever want to install Windows 7. I figured out Linux. I've installed Ubuntu incorrectly multiple times, right? This is part of the learning process in cybersecurity and to a large extent IT. Like, why can't I connect to the Wi-Fi router? What's wrong with DNS? Because it's always DNS, right? So this chart is sort of like going back to that intellectual curiosity and pushing beyond your comfort as part of the learning. And oftentimes on the job, things aren't going to go well. Something's going to break. It may not be directly your fault. Maybe it might be directly your fault. Um, that's okay as long as we don't make that exact same mistake again and we learn from it. But part of the learning process is you probably will encounter some situations where something has broken, right? Maybe you're trying to like jailbreak a phone for your first time. Don't recommend doing it on your brand new iPhone 11 or whatever the new one is, right? Buy some piece of crap off eBay, right? And jailbreak that one so you don't accidentally brick your only mobile device, because then you can't even phone a friend. Some things to keep in mind. Oh, wrong way. Okay. So some people, when I gave this presentation, wanted really specifics. But again, it's hard to give real specifics unless I know what particular job you might be interested in. So if we were talking about cyber analysis, so maybe like a cyber defense analyst or a blue team person, maybe like entry level, like DFIR, digital forensics investigation, incident response, something like that. Like some basic tools that you could play around with at your home lab. Some of this might be useful in some CTFs. It kind of depends on the CTF, right? Well, there's a whole suite called WinSys internals, right? So there's a whole bunch of tools in there that will tell you information that might be critical to some analysis that you're doing on a system or a network, right? If you want to even like get an idea of maybe what forensics even is, you can download Bulk Extractor, which is a really basic free tool to look at some analysis. I've actually used that at a CTF before. Right, so this is maybe some of these tools you might investigate, use, play around with at your house or your home lab if cyber analysis might be the thing you're looking for. And again, this is going to vary depending on job interests, right? If you want to break stuff and be a red teamer and that's your goal at some point, then yeah, Kali, Metasploit, password crackers, like then that's the ticket. That's what you need to kind of look on. And also vulnerability scanners, because basically you do vulnerability scanning before you try to do more advanced pen testing, right? Because if they've got like port 3389 open, then it might be a really easy day in terms of your red team. So some of you are saying, that's great. I mean, I could put all this stuff, but how's that get on my resume, John? This is some professional experience. You're an idiot. No, 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 no. So what you'll see from recruiters, and I have a sample template now for more junior people, is continuing professional education, continuing professional development is right under your professional resume. And that's where you list, this is the CTFs I did, these are the events I volunteered at, these are the conferences I go to, and these are some of the tools that I have in my home lab. And my home lab consists of blah, 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 blah. And as a hiring manager, if I'm hiring a junior person who's breaking into the field and they like really demonstrate and can then speak to these other things they're trying to do, that shows that you have a real interest and passion, and you're going to be higher than someone who just graduated with a 4-year degree in computer science and like really doesn't do anything, doesn't go to any conferences, doesn't have a home lab, doesn't follow the latest cyber news, can't talk about the last major 0 day that was all over, Krebs or something like that. Some other things to keep in mind. So you're still saying, okay, so things that will help you get that important first job. Again, what kind of job, right? So if you ever work anywhere that lets you get a SAN cert, get a SAN cert. They're really expensive. If you got like some super rich parents or whatever, have them pay for it. Rich uncle, rich, whatever. Get a SAN cert. Ask for a SAN certification for Christmas. I don't know if you can do that. CEH has an interesting, I don't know, some people like really in our community like poo-poo the CEH. I think as long as you don't think you're a hacker, if you get it, you're okay, because I still think that it has some validity, especially for more junior people. If you're like 10 years in and already a penetration tester, there'd be no reason to get the certification. I think everybody should like use Wireshark and do some packet analysis sometime, like to really see what's happening at the packet level like that. The first time I ever saw Wireshark, it was like looking at the Matrix. I was like, oh my God, everything is here. Well, yes, everything is a packet, and you should like be able to look at it and understand what's happening. You should know about Windows servers, domains, because most of the corporate networks are still Windows environments. That's changing a little bit with cloud technology, but still overall, like it's Windows and Windows domains and all that fun stuff. Maybe look at Snort, maybe look at VM, probably have some Linux proficiency in there as well. Maybe Splunk, right? Again, this is going to depend on what sorts of jobs you think you might be interested in. If you're doing like analysis, then there's like all kinds of OSINT stuff. OSINT and cyber threat intelligence sometimes have some crossover between what they're looking at. So it sort of depends on what you're doing in OSINT versus cyber threat intelligence. Everybody should like run Nessus on their own home network sometime and look at it. Burp Suite is really interesting to see what's happening when you communicate to the websites. I always tell people with either Wireshark or Burp Suite to go to ESPN, because ESPN has like a bajillion things going on when you go to ESPN. It's really bad. And again, this is stuff you can play around with in your home lab. But some people don't want to do cyber analysis. Some people just want to break stuff, right? That's not really true, but some people really, really like when you pop a remote box and you get like shell or root on a box. It's pretty exciting. And the first couple times I did it in a classroom, it's very exciting to like, remotely be controlling someone else's machine that you don't have permissions to. So again, you have to think like there are entry-level pen testing jobs, there are entry-level red team jobs, but I tell people that like unless you are really good, that is probably not an entry-level job in terms of like overall entry level. Hopefully I didn't lose everybody there. That's like if we think of like professional athletes, that's like, yeah, you're sort of on an NBA team as like the 11th person or whatever, right? So like you just are making it, and yeah, you're on the NBA team, but like no one knows who you are, and you can like walk around Walmart and Target and nobody asks for your autograph because no one knows who you are, right? You're not LeBron James yet. So I say that because like think of all the things that person had to do to become a professional athlete, right? They probably were playing that sport for like years and years and years and years and years and years and work on it and go to camps and like talk to people and have a whole network and like have people working with them and have mentors and have professional contacts in the basketball community. Do you see the analogies here? And then they make the NBA, maybe, right? It's not the world's best analogy. But that's how I try to explain people who are like, I want to be a pen tester. Okay, you can be a pen tester, but that probably is not going to happen tomorrow if you do not have any of the foundational skills necessary to even do like vulnerability assessments or vulnerability analysis. So there's a path to get you to be a red teamer, or else we wouldn't have any. It just generally you have to be very focused about how you're going to get to the point where you're doing penetration testing, to where you're doing red teaming. And then even within red teaming, there's like the standard red teaming, and then it's like, oh, I red team ICS SCADA, or I do adversary emulation red teaming, right? There's even more specializations within red teaming than just entry-level red teaming. So there's a whole bunch of stuff here about how do I get the first set of fundamental skills for red teaming after I have all the other fundamental skills for cybersecurity. And you can study them out of order, but like if you're reading, you know, some CH material or at Cali and you come across things you don't understand, it might be because you sort of did some stuff out of order and you really didn't understand, like, oh, that's how the three-way handshake works, or this is how Wi-Fi is supposed to work. So when I'm trying to crack it, I understand how that process of cracking it works because I really understand the Wi-Fi setup process or the Wi-Fi authentication process. So when I give this talk, I always tell people I almost wasn't going to put in a cyber career path because I think pretty much every cyber career path, every graphic you see is total garbage. There doesn't have to be a career path. It's up to you. So clearly there are some tracks if you want to do certain things. But if you want to be a person who like jumps around and like, I want to do all kinds of things throughout my, 40-year career, whatever you're going to have in cybersecurity, or maybe you're like, I really love reverse engineering malware. I love figuring out what the bad guys are doing so we can stop it. There are people in forensics labs and reverse malware, desks that are much older than I am, and that's what they love to do. Right? Maybe there's people who there's people who are reverse engineering IoT stuff and they love it. They absolutely love it. They don't want to be a manager. They don't want to be a CTO. They don't want to be a CISO. They don't want that. They want to be hands-on. They can do that. There might be people who want to like try a bunch of different things. Like you can shape your career to do that. So I would say you should have mentors. You should have a mentor maybe where you work, and you should always have someone else to talk to, not where you work, because sometimes you're going to need the advice if it's time to move on. There are people who I know and I'm associates with who have worked at the same place for like 7-10 years and they love it. I find myself changing jobs in some capacity like every 2.5 to 3.5 years. Right? It's just the way my career has shaped, and I've loved every minute of my cybersecurity career. I've done lots of different things and have lots of different opportunities. But you're going to want to be proactive. So you should have a plan of, this is how I'm going to get my first job. This is maybe where I want to go. But be flexible because plans change, right? Life happens. So maybe that job where you were flying all over doing incident response was great right up until you have a kid. And then maybe it's not so great anymore. Or maybe you're done having kids and you just sent them off to college and now you want to travel more. So now you want to shape your career to do that, right? Our lives and our careers are continually intertwined. So maybe sometime, you might want to be in charge of like a really big organization or run a startup. But trying to run a startup isn't for everyone because that's a ton of work, right? That's a ton of effort and stress, and maybe that's not for everybody. So there are lots of charts and graphs out there about cybersecurity career paths. But what I want you to take away from this is it's your career. Be active in managing your career. Seek guidance and input from multiple mentors and other professionals in the industry, and just think about managing your career even if you're happy working where you're at. Don't let 3 years go by where you haven't updated your resume, or don't let 3 years go by where you haven't done any professional development. Manage your career, stay involved so that you can, apply for that dream job if it opens up tomorrow. So some other things about getting started in cybersecurity. So there's all the technical skills, all the technical knowledge, skills, and abilities, right? That's going to vary to some degree depending on what your specialization or focus is. So, right, forensics is different from policy, which is going to be different from, I really enjoy leading teams of people, so I want to be a technical manager, to I want to do cyber threat intelligence, I want to be a red teamer, and on and on and on, right? So other than the technical aspects, what else? So we'll cover a couple more slides here, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions. You guys can hit me up later. You need to network. This goes back into managing your career. So there's a lot of virtual events going on right now. And networking doesn't mean, oh, hey, you gave this thing, add me on LinkedIn, can you help me get a job? Like that's not how networking should work, right? Build actual professional relationships with people in the industry, in the portion of the industry that you want to work in or that you think are interesting, right? Find people that are like you, right? So like I'm a veteran, so I often find myself helping or being involved in maybe some veteran focus groups. There's a lot of stuff for women in cybersecurity. There's a lot of focus on diversity right now in the community. So there's plenty of people in the community to help you and give you advice, whether it's advice about the technical portions or whether it's sort of like soft skills or career coaching, sort of mentoring stuff. There's definitely people who are willing to help you, but you have to be proactive and initiate conversations. Now, if you're not good at that in person, now's the perfect time to do that because it doesn't have to be in person. It can all be virtual. A lot of people don't like to hear this when it comes to getting a job. In a lot of cases, as your career progresses, jobs are given out because of who you know or like your network. And I know people don't like to hear that. Might not be applicable for entry-level jobs, but it certainly doesn't hurt, right? So just keep that in mind as well. Follow cybersecurity news. This is going back to being involved in the world, being involved in cybersecurity. So like if you want to be a vulnerability expert or maybe you want to do bug bounty sorts of things, then I would expect at the interview, if there was some breaking news within the last few weeks about like a major thing related to bug bounties, that you'll probably be able to know about it. But if I ask you a question about, oh, hey, did you see that thing where Brian Krebs just saw that, Experian is going to stand up a bug bounty program because they just got popped again, and you're like, what's Experian and who's Brian Krebs? Then that tells me maybe you're not a fit for that job, right? A lot comes across in the interview. Are you interested? Are you interesting? Can you communicate? Are you articulate? Do you show passion for wanting to have this job and work at that particular organization? Some other bits of career advice. Preparing your resume is much more time consuming than you think it is. It's going to require a lot more work than you think it does. I worked with Adam recently on his resume. You should have multiple versions of your resume. Your resume may be different for different markets or industries. If you're applying for like a state or federal job, your resume is probably different than if you're applying for a sort of commercial job in the banking sector. You can practice your interviews and you can nail some certain questions. So even if you are looking at more entry-level jobs in this field and trying to get your foot in the door, you can anticipate a wide variety of standard things in an interview that you can absolutely frickin' practice and hit out of the park. Hey, Kevin, is it Kevin Rossi? Did I pronounce that correct? Thanks for coming in today, Kevin. Why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself? What would you tell me your greatest strength is? Your greatest weakness? Why?
Did you want me to actually answer?
No, it's okay. We'll take too much time, but I'm glad that you're ready. I appreciate it. And then, so there's often going to be two parts to your interview. There's sort of that soft skill, like tell me about your communication skills. Are you good at presenting in front of people? This requires briefing on a quarterly basis. And then there's going to be some technical questions, probably depending on what your skills are. Again, you'll want to practice. You're going to want to practice a soft no. So, Ray, this position requires some PCAP knowledge, and we use Wireshark here. Sometimes maybe TCP dump if it's a lot of data. Could you talk about your experience with Wireshark or TCP dump? Well, maybe you don't have any professional experience, but you knew it was in the job requirement, so you've been practicing. So your answer is, well, John, I don't have a lot of professional experience with Wireshark, but what I've been doing in anticipation of getting a job like this is in my home lab, I have completed these 2 cyber courses, and in the CTF at DEF CON, they required the use of PCAP to find one of the flags. And then I don't remember that you didn't have professional experience. I remembered a soft no and a really good explanation. Because what some people will say is, no, I don't have any experience with that. And then what the panel or the person is thinking is, well, we're probably not going to hire you if that's really critical to the job. Some other general things: study what you enjoy. Like, if this is new to you and you have, I know everybody wants / needs a job. So like, if you have to take a job, you can take a job, but that doesn't mean you have to stay in that job forever if you hate it. I don't understand people, generally speaking, who are in a technical career field who stay somewhere that they don't like, right? If you have some initiative and put in some work, you can shape your career and develop an exit strategy. So ideally, find what interests you, right? So I'm real big on mission driven. Like, am I doing something important? That's really important for me. That's not necessarily important for everybody else. Like, there are people who, are great at selling stuff. Now, I'm not saying selling stuff isn't important, but I'm not sure it exactly meets my mark of like, is what I do some greater good, right? But I mean, there are some people who love sales. There's also some psychological things like that, getting the final sale on like, a big contract, right? And there's tech salesmen, right? Because I need to understand the technology even though I might not implement it, right? So there's lots of room in the field to be who you are, to do more of what you like. My dad always said success is doing more of what you like and less of what you don't like. I know everybody likes money, but at some point, money also won't be the only thing that brings you happiness. So people who don't have any money generally unhappy. But just because you have money doesn't mean that you're actually enjoying your career in your life either. So words of wisdom: have multiple people look at your resume. Have your mom look at your resume. Have your aunt look at your resume, your friend, some guy you just met. Have multiple people look at the resume. And again, your resume is probably going to take a lot more time than you think. And don't try to put every single thing on your resume. Your resume gets the interview. The interview is where you get hired. All the resume does is get you the interview. So it's not a complete like life history bibliography of you as an individual. Put the most critical, most relevant skills on there, because that gets you the interview. Find some mentors. There's more links in here of like other free things. So like some career advice, some ethical hacking, an MIT course, right? There's a lot of stuff in here that's free that you can learn. And like, if you go through this whole MIT course and like you study it, I don't know that you get a certification. I don't know that you get anything, but I put that however 50-hour MIT course, professional development. You can put it on your resume. You could put anything on your resume. People lie on the resume all the time. So you can certainly put the things you're actually doing on there. There's more resources on here. And again, this is like a smattering of different things because, right, I don't know if you want to be a cyber threat intel analyst, if you want to do programming or malware reversing, or, you want to run a ransomware criminal scheme. Probably not best to do that in the United States or anywhere that we have an extradition treaty. So that's the basics that I can get in the time limit we have today. So you got my Gmail, you got my LinkedIn, and I'm pretty active on Twitter. If you want a lot more content like this, there's a conference this Friday and Saturday called the Diana Initiative that is particularly focused on women and underrepresented groups in cyber. So there's a lot of women speakers and a lot of non-white guys who will be talking. There is a career village that I will be a part of on Saturday. If you do want resume review, and this type of thing happens very frequently. DEF CON just had a career village. The Diana Institute will have a career village. There's a lot of conferences going on where you can talk to recruiters or professionals like myself and get resume help, mock interviews, career advice. But if anybody has some specific questions today, I'm happy to take them now, and I can make the slides available then, and we can figure that out later. So thanks for having me today.
Oh, there's one question. What are
Oh
some
my
good
God, there's
places?
so many chats.
Yeah, not many questions in there
Okay.
though. What are some good places to find mentors if you don't have anyone in your organization?
So all the virtual conferences that are happening. So let's say I go to a conference and I'm interested in Kubernetes, I think is how you say that, right? So there are some fairly infamous, not infamous, some fairly like internet famous people about Kubernetes, right? So maybe like the top person might not be the best person to ask if they've got like 7,000 Twitter followers or whatever, right? Ian Coldwater, correct, right? So it might not be best to DM her, but who else is around? Like who else is in her network? But if like you see a presentation by like, I just saw one from B-Side San Antonio. He's either active duty or reserve U.S. Air Force person. His talk on cyber threat intelligence was out of the park. And he doesn't seem to be famous. He had a handful of Twitter followers, but I found him on LinkedIn. He gave his LinkedIn. And so like I can make a connection, right? And that's someone I can ask questions about because they're not being inundated, right? Because it doesn't take more than probably like 4,000 Twitter followers to be inundated with questions and DMs. Go to the career village, like start to build your professional network of people you interact with. So like if you come to the career village and you're like, hey, I just had a question for the mentors. What was one thing you wish you could tell your younger self about your career? And then like maybe ask then if you could follow up on Twitter with some other questions, right? Some people will be more open to that. Some people have more time and some people have less time. Hopefully that answers the question. Oh no, he said OSINT. OSINT is literally like its own career field now.
It is. That's my job.
I used to work with Micah Hoffman. I think he wrote the SANS OSINT class. He's certainly instructing it now.
Yes, he did.
Yes, yeah, he quit his day job and like started a company and like went like it's crazy. I never want to start my company. That sounds terrible. Some people love that. Some people like start a company, sell it. Those people may be insane as well, but it's the thing they do.
And Rich, John, question for you. I have a background like your own. I was an Army and NSA signals analyst, got out of the Army and started my own business, moved away from that. Now I'm finishing up at Penn State in security and risk analysis, the cybersecurity option. So my concern is with so many areas within cybersecurity and wanting to get into one that suits my analytical bent, my desire to explore the analytical side of me. That means I'm going to have to start somewhere further down the line, obviously. So in other words, if I want to work in a SOC or I want to work in cyber threat analysis, what advice do you have for someone who's starting out in the cyber world, but with that analytical mindset and background? How do we get ourselves into the jobs we want?
Well, you're going to want to do proactive things, do some professional development for the thing you're going to be interested in. So there's a couple fields that come to mind: cyber threat intelligence, forensics, right? Kind of depends. Like forensics is more technical. Cyber threat intel can be less technical. There are very technical people in cyber threat intel, DFIR, right? So those are the three main ones that come to mind. You want to craft your resume because you're going to want to call out the things that speak to those disciplines. And then, like, can you take this cyber training on threat intel? Did you, go or watch certain presentations? Could you give a presentation at some point about like analytic process, and then your CFP gets linked on your resume? Could you write a blog about your experience, right? So there's little things that you can do that you can elevate on your resume. And I would use a more junior template where instead of just going right from professional summary to work experience, I would insert a section that is basically like continual education or professional development focused on cyber threat intel or forensics or DFIR concepts and courses, so that you can speak to that about, this is how I'm trying to pivot into this field now, even though I had a career that maybe was not exactly tied to this. The other thing to be confident of, and this is something I tell people who are not brand new into the workforce, is be confident with the things you bring to the table. When we make any hiring decision, there's huge risk. There's huge risk in hiring. There's even higher risk in hiring somebody that doesn't really have a lot of work experience. Like, I have no idea if this 24-year-old Luke Westfall guy is even going to show up for work, right? He just
Sure.
graduated, right? So, like, you can also speak to all of the things you've done professionally at that interview. So you can nail all the questions about working with a team, overcoming a challenge, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure. So you alluded to templates, a more junior template. Do you have a recommendation or do you have a source for cyber resume templates?
I just have one overall template, and what you'll do is take sort of this generic templates, which I'm going to copy here. You can take this generic template and then sort of look at the job recs, like do some research, look at the job recs that are coming up. Probably Lockheed Martin kill chain, cyber attack, Bianco's pyramid of pain, any of the analytic techniques that you may have had courses about, analysis of competing hypotheses, all that kind of root cause analysis, 5 whys. So you can take that general template and then sort of like, the other big thing is when you're applying and when it's factually accurate, take the jargon and terms from the job requirement and use those terms in the resume, right?
Then on top of that, good recommendation. Yes.
Right.
Keywords.
Right. And it's not just for the automated systems, but I literally will use Control F on people's resumes if I'm trying to go through stacks and stacks of resumes. So it's not even always just for the automated systems.
Gotcha. Thank you. Great advice.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, we might have time for another 1 or 2 questions if you guys have anything for me.
I just wanted to comment. Oh, you can go.
Oh, good.
I just wanted to comment really quick. You mentioned adding this stuff at the top of your resume, like blogs and stuff. You had given me the same advice when I met with you at, I think it was B-Sides Pittsburgh. And I did that to my resume, and the company I applied for actually kind of coached me into adding more like blogs and presentations and stuff. And that actually did get me a job there. So it is definitely sound advice.
And you can even put, so one thing, people are like, if you're absolutely terrified of speaking in front of people, I understand. But if you're okay and you can get over the anxiety of speaking in front of people, one, you should. It's a really critical skill. And submit a call for presentation on something that you can talk about. If you can talk about something off the top of your head right now for 15 or 20 minutes, that's enough to fill a 30-minute slot for a CFP at an event. And even if you're not rejected, you can put that you submitted the call for presentation in that professional development, because that again would show me that you're trying, right? You're proactive, you have initiative. But it doesn't have to be that. You could just volunteer to be a goon somewhere, or like a Sherpa, or all the other terms we use at the events, right? And that will also, when you volunteer at these events, helps build your network, right? It's super critical. So I mostly have done this through like the career villages or presenting, but there's a lot of people who are so terrified of presenting, but so what they do instead is they volunteer at the events.
Real quick question. So I've never worked in the tech field before, and I'm just getting started here at Penn State with some of these cybersecurity classes. So I really don't have a general idea of the particular field that I want to work in. But I'm starting to look at internships and, what might be the next step for me there, hoping to roll that into a eventual job. Would you suggest maybe something in the IT field, or is there like a specific type of IT that lends itself more to the cybersecurity aspect that you recommend?
There's quite a number of people who did like network administration who transfer over to cybersecurity. So like if you're administrating and resetting passwords and configuring things, you're going to get a lot of just general experience about like what's wrong, right? That you're not going to get somewhere else.
Right.
And how bad it is, right? Like, oh my God, why we've never patched anything ever. Why is that? So I think like if you're starting out and you're junior, that's going to be fine. So, I mean, I think a network engineering job, programming or DevSecOps, if that's your thing, or sort of just like running the help desk and getting some real firsthand experience with customer service. Because the other thing that's interesting is that a lot of cybersecurity has a customer service element of some capacity. And there are some tech people who are just straight up assholes, and they are not good with customers and clients, and it's hugely problematic for them in their career. So even if you have to be the guy who like is, you know, explaining how, like, no, left click, no, right click, any key means any key on the keyboard, right? I mean, there's some real important soft skills there too. But no, I mean, I think anything in IT as an internship will be okay.
Great, thanks.
Any more questions?
Just want to say thank you for getting this tech club rolling and to have some very interesting presentations. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. I do it for you guys. All right. Well, if nobody has any more questions, I believe John posted his contact info in the group chat. I will also be putting this video up on YouTube, and I will try to put the links in the comments as well. And John, if you want to send me the presentation, I can put it in our Teams.
Yeah. The other thing I'll say for those people who have 16 years of admin experience, you are already able to mentor other people. So even somebody who just graduated, can you imagine what you know now if you would have known that when you were a freshman? We need more mentors. We need more people helping. And again, whether that's a blog or volunteering, that can go on your resume then, which is very helpful and shows that you're proactive. So be willing to be another mentor just as much as you're looking for mentorship as well. Thank you so much for having me again.
Yeah, thank you for being here. It's a lot of good information that I think everybody needs. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.
Do I understand both the PowerPoint and the links you were alluding to the YouTube video will be in the Teams area?
Yes, I'll put the presentation if John sends it to me.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, folks. I appreciate it.
Thanks,
Good night,
everyone.
everybody.
Good night.